Welcome to Transform with Travel, a show helping busy professionals plan more bucket list trips that reignite adventure and go beneath the surface, without the overwhelm of planning, the endless midnight scroll, and the crowded tourist traps. Buckle up, because we are about to take off. Hi there, explorers. Welcome to the Transform with Travel podcast. Thank you for being here with me today. I'm Kelly Tolliday. I'm the founder of this podcast of Transform with Travel, and our mission is to inspire you to explore the world, take leaps of faith, open your mind, and let the world show you a new perspective. I truly believe in the transformational power that travel can bring to your lives, and I know how much it can enhance the quality of your life too. However, in order for many of us to get out there in the world, that means we likely need to get on an airplane from time to time. I have flown hundreds, if not thousands, of hours at this stage in my traveling career, and I still get nervous, even if there's a little bit of turbulence or a funny sound. And I actually created an entire ebook dedicated to applying mindfulness to our travel experiences, so that when we encounter travel mishaps, plot twists, turbulence, both literally and figuratively, we can manage the stress with more ease. So check out the Mindful Traveler ebook on my website, transformwithtravel.co, to download there. But I got the idea for today's podcast after the tragic incident with the severe turbulence experienced by that Singapore Airlines flight back in May. And it got me thinking, how common are these types of experiences? I mean, I've definitely experienced turbulence. I wouldn't ever say that it was that severe, that it caused as much tragedy as that flight did. But it definitely got me thinking, like, is this common? When should I start getting worried on a flight? Like, for real, not just my anxiety creeping. And like, when is it actually go time to start, strapping in and getting prepared for that type of turbulence? And like, what's the actual data on how safe flying actually is? So I reached out to my online community to see if there were any commercial passenger pilots who would be happy to share their experiences with us on the podcast. And one of my friends from college was actually in the same Facebook group that I was posting in, and she saw my post and reached out because her husband is actually a pilot. And fast forward to today, here we are. In this episode, I welcome Simon Brackett, also known as Cujo, which you'll hear later on why in this episode. And Simon is a current legacy airline captain and a former Air Force Special Operations pilot. He also has the very unique perspective working with the FAA through a program called ASAP, which is a safety reporting program that allows pilots to debrief and fill out a report for any mistakes that may have been made, all in the effort to try to prevent, similar experiences and mistakes from happening again. So he says, even with seeing virtually everything that can go wrong and what is actually reported to him, in his words, he says, without a shadow of a doubt, aviation is the safest mode of transportation. And he has kids too. So he always says, I will be the first to put my kids on an airplane. And so he talks a little bit about, the everyday procedures and routines and why we're doing them on the airplane as passengers on the airplane, what we're seeing, what's happening behind the scenes, when we should be wearing a seatbelt on an airplane. Spoiler alert, it's all of the time. And the statistics behind the safety of flying with kids, so much more. We go through a lot. And even behind the statistics, the safety, the procedures, we actually really go one step deeper into the compassion that we can give to everyone that we encounter when we travel. We talk about, especially during the pandemic, people were getting very angry on flights, or somebody might be drunk, or, there was all these reports about people getting into fights onto planes, and we kind of go in straight into judgment. And he explains, from his perspective, that he just is there to listen to the passengers and give compassion. And he talks about a lot about how we can just really become better humans to each other through this process, because everyone's going through some level of anxiety or challenge in their life, and that we're on literally all in this plane together. We're all going from point A to point B together. So how can we be kinder and more compassionate to each other? So it was definitely a turn in the conversation that I wasn't expecting, and I was so grateful that we got there. So this was honestly a 10 out of 10 conversation, and I can't wait for you to listen, to learn, hopefully to laugh. And be sure to stay tuned to the end of the episode, where I will give one of my tried and true techniques to help you combat anxiety while traveling. This is actually also in my new ebook, The Mindful Traveler. So you're getting a little sneak peek at the end of the episode. So my friends, buckle up. See you on the other side. All right. Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Transform with Travel podcast. I'm your host, Kelly Tolliday, and I am the founder of Transform with Travel, where we design intentional travel itineraries and experiences for clients around the world. We also share loads of resources like this podcast, ebooks, and destination guides on our website. So go and check that out after this episode is done. So basically, I'm wondering if you're like me, and even after hundreds of hours in the air, I am still a nervous flyer. I pray during turbulence. I do my deep breaths. I get nervous every single time. And I was left wondering why. Why am I so nervous? Why do I know so little about the flying experience and the flying process? And when I'm on a plane at least a couple times a month, like, why don't I know so much about what I'm doing? So because of this, I am now today chatting with Simon Brackett, who is a current Legacy airline captain and former Air Force Special Operations pilot. And we're going to deep dive into the flying experience from a pilot's perspective and why we shouldn't feel as fearful as we do. But before we get into that conversation, I just want to ask if, dear listeners, have you subscribed to the podcast yet? Because I seriously do a little happy dance every time I see a new subscriber come in. So if you haven't yet, go ahead and click subscribe. It is the easiest thing you can do today to help you get on your way to more world travel and adventure. Okay, so back to this episode. Simon, thank you so much, Simon, for joining me today.
Hey, it's my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
So to start this episode off, I want to play a little game. Have you heard of the game Two Truths and a Lie?
Painfully familiar with it.
Okay, are you down to play with me?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, cool. So go ahead and share with me two truths and a lie, and I will do my best to guess the lie.
My two truths and a lie. So first is I am a current hockey coach of the 6-year-old and under age group. However, I never played hockey at all.
Okay.
The second is my Air Force call sign came by way of being bitten by the dog that was in the helicopter crash on the Osama bin Laden raid.
Okay.
And the third is I once finished a marathon after completely destroying one of the ligaments in my knee.
Oh my God. I feel like I could say all of them seem a little bit like something that would happen. I don't know. Okay, I'm going to say the lie is the marathon.
Yeah.
Oh, wow. Go me.
Yep. Not
Okay,
a marathoner.
so yeah, you know what? I was like, I feel like that'd be pretty hard to do, but you never know. If you have your mind set to something, you can pretty much go mind over matter for anything. So you are a hockey coach for the 6 and unders, very competitive, I'm sure. You've never played hockey before. I feel like that's something you could get away with, though, yeah?
You know, when they asked last year, they said we need more bodies out here to help, you know, the way the USA Hockey's got it set up. Like, we just need more people. We need more folks out here, moms and dads, to run these drills. And I went up to the coach. I was like, listen, I got no business touching a puck, but I can touch hearts and minds all day. If that helps, give me a set of skates and a helmet and let's go. And he did. And it's been a great experience. I love the sport of hockey.
That's awesome. And so can you do like a little backstory into the Air Force story that you just said?
What was it? 2014, I was deployed to Djibouti, Africa, and the area that we were in was in close proximity to like the one Wi-Fi connection, right? And if we wanted to sit and be able to talk to our significant other, in this case, Brianne and I were dating at the time, you could kind of get really close to the fence. We were in like a walled compound. Imagine like prison high walls with barbed wire. And anyway, I was sitting up against the fence trying to text and email and do all that. Well, I was taking refuge inside what can only be described kind of as a horse trailer. Okay. That they would use for exercises. They'd bring it out in the middle of the desert. So in the Djiboutian desert, you're talking 125 degrees Fahrenheit and lots of humidity. So you're trying to hide where you can. And while I was on the phone, the team that operates this dog had him off his leash because they were inside the compound, no big deal. And he found me inside this horse trailer. I'm an avid dog person, so I attempted to pet the dog, and then I kind of quickly rethought my life choices. Maybe I shouldn't touch this dog. I don't know. I don't know whether he was offended by the fact that I wouldn't pet him or I did something, made some sort of jostling movement. But the next thing I know, I got 65, 75-pound Belgian Malinois chewing on my leg while I'm on the phone with Brienne.
Oh
And
my God.
yeah, they came around the corner, and they're attack dogs too, so that's what they're designed to do. I got really, really lucky that the damage was pretty minimal, but the aftermath of that ended up with the call sign Cujo for a variety of reasons, but
Oh my God.
that was the origin of it. So
That is crazy. Poor Brienne on the phone, like, what's going on? Are you okay?
she still to this day describes and laughs about that because here I'm sitting in a quote combat environment, and she hears this ruckus and chaos, and what I thought I would sound like under an extremely stressful situation is not what she heard. She describes it more as like if a fox got a hold of like a small groundhog or something, that I was the groundhog.
Oh my God.
I guess I don't project extreme masculinity when I'm being attacked by a dog or what have you. It's a little embarrassing, but
Okay, so
nevertheless.
we'll call you Cujo from now on. Okay, sounds good. All right, so Simon, we're so excited to have you here today. I hear a lot from people about, they'll fly because they have to, but they're just generally afraid. Nothing major has happened to them. Maybe they've had a little bit of turbulence here and there. They haven't been involved in something catastrophic. There's just this general air of anxiety and nerves and an unknown. I think that's where a lot of anxiety stems from, is not knowing what is actually happening while you're in the air. So a lot of today is going to kind of unravel a bit of that. But to start, I would love to hear like where your passion for flying and aviation, like where did that come from?
Yeah, I'm a different story than most. One of the things I've done in my recent past is I did interview prep for folks coming to the airline. So I got to hear all the stories of everyone, how they got into aviation. And I realized more than I knew before how much of an outlier my story was. I had no intention of being a pilot growing up. I was going to law school. Like that was going to be
Mm.
it. My brother's 10 years my senior. He went on to law school. So of course, what am I going to do but what my big brother does? I'm pretty confident I would, if I'm not the only one, I'm one of many, very few that was in the sixth grade studying for the LSAT. Like that's how dedicated I was to I'm going to law school. Went to Florida State for undergrad, walked onto that campus and never wanted to leave. So that's what brought me there. Did engineering because the intention was to go into intellectual property law, copyrights, patents, trademarks, all that super snazzy stuff. And as life would have it, right, life always gets a vote in life plans. Famous Mike Tyson quote: "Everybody has a plan until they get punched in the face." So life took a good shot at me, and it was good because it really helped me recage my gyros a bit, to steal an aviation term. Growing up and you see doctors, lawyers, you see these highly respected, highly lucrative sometimes professions. What drives you at 18 years old? Money, right? So I wanted to be a lawyer because I wanted to make a bunch of money, and I had life get its vote, and I decided that I really wanted to make a difference more than I wanted to make a paycheck. So I changed things around. I immediately looked into what it would take to be a military pilot. That was something that appealed to me. And it seemed like my skill set said the most. I spent a lot of time on the computer researching, and pilot was one that kind of kept coming back to. So I went into all three branches. I went to the Air Force, the Navy, and the Marine Corps trying to become a pilot. They must have been low on candidates, or I got real lucky because they all said yes. And I got the opportunity to fly with the Air Force. I had some small ties to the Air Force. My father did 4 years when he was younger during Vietnam. And so, he always had positive things to say. I knew there was the widest variety of aircraft in the Air Force. And I had no idea what I wanted to fly. I'd never flown an airplane. So I was like, well, maybe if I got the most options, I'll get close enough. So went off to pilot training in Columbus, Mississippi. And I mean, I had an amazing class. They did a great job of, taking the green behind the ear guy and just dragging him through the program. I got incredibly lucky that I got my first choice. I wanted special operations. I really wanted, when I say I wanted to make a difference, what that meant to me was we were in the middle of the global war on terror, 2009 timeframe, right? There were a lot of boots on the ground that were really having tough times. And I was like, I want to be a part of making sure those guys and gals come home. So I knew I wanted special ops. That was the it for me. And this one platform came across. It seemed really interesting. It was a little bit, I don't want to say cloak and dagger, but they weren't super overt about what the mission was, which of course makes it way more intriguing. I ended up getting that as my first choice. It's called the U-28. It's a civilian Pilatus PC-12. If anyone out there is aviation buff, they want to look it up. It's what it looks like. It's not exactly something that you put up on your wall to stare at, although I do have one right there. But it was an amazing mission working with some outstanding people in the special ops communities. Just my hat goes off, and my personal life average went up a lot being around those influences. So that's what took me to aviation on the whole. What took me out of the Air Force and into the airlines is one word, very simply spoken: kids. 10 deployments with active duty was enough. I felt like I made the difference. And as soon as we had our first of now 2 boys, I realized that now the difference I wanted to make was dad. Wanted to be dad, wanted to have more predictability and be home. And so that led me to the airlines. And here I sit today.
Wow. The amount of time and, not just sacrifice for yourself, but also with your wife and, like just the amount of family, everything that it takes to have done what you've done is incredible. And what do you think you like learned the most from that experience being deployed as many times as you and also being within the special ops? What do you think was like one of the biggest standout insights from that?
Oh boy, that's a strong one. I'll say one of the things in one of the ways that I changed the most throughout that, I'm a big fan of the quote, anecdote, statement, whatever you want to call it, that you become the average of the people you surround yourself with. And I went into the Air Force and went into piloting. I didn't lack any self-confidence. I felt like I was capable in a lot of ways. And then I got to meet folks that are light years ahead of me in every way. I mean, and not, one person individually is all of those ways, but you'll hang out with folks that could have been Olympic athletes. You'll hang out with folks that have multiple PhDs. You'll hang out with folks that have gone through the most difficult life circumstances you can't even fathom, and they do it all with a smile. And so throughout the course of that time, I think building resilience and perseverance, I've kind of lived by this motto maybe in the last decade of my life, that it's important to be comfortable being uncomfortable. And anyone that knows me will laugh because they'll see me, it'll be Florida State game, right? If I'm at an FSU football game, guarantee you I'm wearing pants and a long sleeve shirt. And if you stuck around on a noon game, you know that that's brutal. But
yeah,
I don't do it intentionally to beat myself up. It's just that I've gotten to a point where I'm very comfortable being uncomfortable. And it's because I know through other influences, other people, the mountains that can be climbed if you need to, right? If you put your mind to it, what you can accomplish. And so it really helps put things back into perspective. And life just becomes a lot easier when you're comfortable being uncomfortable. So I think that's probably the biggest takeaway I took from that time frame is perspective.
Yeah, I love that quote, being comfortable with the discomfort. I talk about this a lot, but there's a book called The Comfort Crisis by Michael Easter, and he talks about how the more comfortable as a society we've become, actually the more susceptible to depression and anxiety and just not being generally happy with our lives. And pushing ourselves and being uncomfortable is the key to actually living a satisfactory, like less loving the quality of your life. So I love that. And I loved when you said the personal life average had gone up through that experience. I think with any experience where you are pushed outside of your comfort zone and you do have to rely on your company. Like you have to rely on the people that you surround yourself with, not just to get through day by day, but to actually like live through that experience. I think just totally shapes. I haven't been in war, but I've been in a pretty major natural disaster where it was, some people couldn't speak the same language and we were all holding each other's hands, and it totally changes your perspective on what's important. So I appreciate you sharing that. So like I mentioned before, we're going to talk a lot about this, like just the act of flying and the experience of flying. You've had a lot of different experiences of flying in combat, flying through, in your deployment, flying as a commercial airline. And so a lot of this fear of flying is often caused by uncertainty. And I'd love to hear like if you have some on hand, some of the safety stats, like how is flying actually safe? Is it safe? I don't know. I'd love to hear from you.
Yeah, I get a unique perspective in that. So within the company that I work for, I also do an additional duty where there's a program that the FAA developed called ASAP. It's a safety reporting program. And to put it very simply, you can self-report to this program and you are granted an extreme measure of confidentiality. Right now, obviously, there are some things that would be exclusionary if you were, alcohol, drugs, intentional malpractice, things like that. But outside of that, it is like you are given. I'm not going to use the word immunity because that's not the right word. But if you think of it in that context, in the legal sense, right, you can say anything you want. We can't hold it against you. it's the same idea. You get this confidentiality. And so I get to, on a monthly basis, sit down with individuals and do a debrief. So they have filled out a report. They have reported on either a mistake they made, an error that was trapped, a problem that they saw that maybe didn't manifest. And I get to dig in a little bit and find out, what was the origin of it? Was there maybe a procedural error? Was there a knowledge gap? Was there somebody else that influenced this perception? Or, hey, did everything go right? And what did we do that leads to that success? So I really get to peel back the onion on the safety things. And I can tell you beyond a shadow of a doubt, I'm like the ER doctor, right? That tells their kids, don't go jump on the pogo stick outside because I've seen what pogo sticks can do. I know all of the hyperbole that can be, and I'm still the first person to put both my kids on the airplane with me. Like there was a statistic recently, and folks out there can fact check this or feel free to argue it. I don't know the validity. I know the source. There was a Dr. Jimmy Chung was his name, and healthcare and aviation work very hand in hand, and healthcare tries to match the safety levels and mechanisms of aviation. And he stated that if aviation incidents occurred at the same rate that healthcare incidents occur, which I would characterize healthcare as pretty safe, especially in the US, we would have 460 airplane crashes per day.
Wow.
So that really throws into perspective, like the amount that we have is so tiny. The NHTSA said there's almost 99 fatalities per day and 7,500 injuries per day in cars. I would be surprised at my company if I hear more than 3 injuries per month.
Wow. And it's no small company. Like that's crazy. Wow.
And that's in relation to like inside an aircraft, right? Obviously, if somebody trips over a tow bar outside or something like that doesn't factor into this. But, somebody happens to be up at the wrong time and there's some turbulence. Somebody doesn't follow a procedure and closes a latch on their fingers. Like those are the kinds of instances that I would hear about. And it's incredibly minute.
Wow. I mean, I always think it like for me to get from my house in Broward County, Fort Lauderdale area, down to Miami Airport, I always think I'm more likely to get into a car crash going to the airport than I am once I board that plane.
Extremely so.
There's something about knowing the statistics is helpful, but then there's some primal instinct when you're in the air that kind of kicks in as a passenger, at least, where there's still a little bit of that fear, right? There's still a little bit of like, oh my God, what's that turbulence? Or the feeling when you take off and then like it kind of drops a little bit and you're kind of like, oh God, what's happening? So could you talk a little bit of those examples? And this can just help us, like for me, at least, like knowing information helps me like stop from spiraling because it's like, okay, it's that certainty of information. What are some of the like common reasons that people like spiral a little bit into that anxiety while they're traveling? Like what is happening during turbulence? What's happening during takeoff? What are some of the top things that you kind of like, if you were to explain it to your kids, why they're feeling certain things, what would you say, I guess?
Well, one of the things, it'd probably be no surprise, don't need me to characterize that the unknown is always uncomfortable. So that's why when folks would rather have bad news than no news, because the uncertainty is discomforting. And so when you don't know why we're taking so long or what was that sound, what was that bump, your imagination only has the opportunity to run wild, and our imaginations are pretty impressive. Turbulence on the whole, I even tried to dig through like NTSB reports and old stuff. I've never come across an instance where turbulence caused structural damage to an aircraft. I mean, there are C-130s that fly into hurricanes out of Louisiana. The hurricane hunters, they go right into the center of a hurricane. Now, granted, they're intentionally designed for that. But if you think of turbulence is what it is. It's changes in direction and density and temperature within air, right? So it's just instability of air. If you think of when you're on a boat and you're going on nice glassy water, everything is smooth. When you're going on choppy water, you're bumping along and it's uncomfortable. It's the same general idea. I really I oversimplified that. I'm sure there's some aeronautical engineers and folks out there that are probably like gagging right now at how simply I described that. But that's essentially what it is.
I'm the average listener, so that description works for me.
Yeah, it's just air density changes and rough air. The air is always going up and down and changing directions. If you go this altitude, it might be going one way, and you drop down, it's going another way. So it's just kind of churning about. Some of the more common things that generate turbulence, clouds. When you go through clouds, there's a change in air density. And so those are typically a little bit more bumpy. If you're in closer proximity to a thunderstorm, there's energy that gets dissipated off of that. And so you get a lot of that churning air, which is why we try to stay at least 10 to 20 miles away from a thunderstorm. Those things all cause that. But you can be on a completely clear day with nothing but blue skies in front of you, and you can be in turbulent air. There's not really a way to visually see that. But of course, from the back of the aircraft, we're like, is this good? Is this bad? Is this going to get worse? When's it going to stop? And so I can see that being, especially for folks that don't have the view that we have, right? We're seeing the front of the airplane, so we know what's out front. Everyone else is looking out the side and just kind of guessing.
Yeah, and is that why it's important to kind of keep the seatbelt on, even if the seatbelt sign's off? Can you talk a little? Let's talk about the seatbelt sign. It's kind of controversial. I was just on a plane Saturday. So what is this? 4 days ago. Just on a plane Saturday. The seatbelt sign is on. I am like zipping myself tight. I'm like, all right, here we go. I got my kid on my lap. I got my other kid next to me. I am like, when that seatbelt sign goes on, I am on it. And there's people getting up, going to the bathroom. They're saying on the intercom 1,000 times, like, the seatbelt sign is on, please sit down, you can't use the bathroom. Like, and just constantly people are getting up. So I guess it's kind of a two-parter. I'll start with the first part. Let's talk a little bit about, when is it like, okay, we're going to turn the seatbelt sign on, and what's the reasoning? Like, is it to keep us safe during turbulence in case there ends up being like really rough, ends up being like pretty intense, or what's the reasoning behind that?
Yeah, that's exactly it. So 10,000 feet's a special number. Below 10,000 feet is kind of a sacred area, right? So the expectation is everyone's in their seats, everyone has their seatbelt on, we're close to the ground, we're not talking about things that aren't related to the airplane. We're not talking about the FSU football game last night. We're not talking about, where we're going hiking. And that's also why the flight attendants are seated. There's no PAs, et cetera. But once we get above that, usually the seatbelt sign will often remain on until we're level, because we don't know what that ride's going to look like until we're there. And sometimes it takes, 45 minutes to get to your final altitude. And so that seatbelt sign stays on because it's an unknown. And exactly, you nailed it right on the head. If there is turbulence that we didn't anticipate, rougher air, then that can be problematic, right? A moderate turbulence is kind of described as the level of turbulence that would knock drinks off of the flight attendant cart. If it's spilling
Right.
things over, that's kind of moderate. You get definitely that light in the seat of the pants bounce. That's moderate. And we get reports, but there's so much sky. We're getting reports from either somebody else has flown through it recently, or we have like a weather system that can kind of project. We have meteorologists that look at all these things and do their best to characterize it. The airplanes report it as you fly through it. So there's a lot of data that goes into predicting where is the turbulence and to what level is it. If we know we're going to get light or greater, usually the safest bet is to keep the seatbelt sign on, because it's a conservative approach. It might say light and light might be fine. If we get one bump of moderate and you're in the bathroom changing a diaper, or someone elderly is getting up waiting to use the restroom and they don't have the same stability that they had when they were a little younger, well, that can cause people to get hurt. And of course, like anything, right, there's still a business aspect. When people get hurt,
Yeah.
companies get sued, people get in trouble. And so while it is predominantly for safety, I'd be silly to say that there's not also a responsibility, a legal aspect of keep the sign on.
Yeah.
Until you're certain that it's going to be smooth.
Yeah, because something that comes to mind for me, and actually the reason, the inspiration for this podcast, on top of just my own personal, like, just super interested in learning more about it, was I think I had messaged you around the time of the Singapore Airlines flight where they had the severe turbulence and 71 people got hurt. I think one person had died. And part of that was they had to, I think as an airline, they totally rehauled their policies around like seatbelts on all the time or something along the lines of that. So is that like a piece of advice that you could give to someone? It sounds super basic, but it's just like, if you're seated and you're not using the bathroom, keep your seatbelt on. That's one of the best ways to keep yourself safe.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. And that's part of our spiel in the beginning, that welcome aboard message. I usually get up. Not all captains get up and stand in front and kind of have not a conversation, but a welcome aboard. But I like to, for a variety of reasons, mostly customer interaction. But when I say that, now the flight attendants don't have to. And so it's just kind of part of my spiel of, hey, if you're in your seat, please keep your seatbelt fastened in case we encounter any unexpected rough air. If I'm in my seat, my seatbelt's on. My kids are in their seat, their seatbelts are on. I'll tell you a time, this is maybe a useful tool. if when you're flying, you take off, the seatbelt sign's on. When you get level, assuming that the pilots up front remembered to turn it off, which I promise you absolutely never happens. Don't forget to reach up and turn off the turbulence switch. But if it goes off and then it comes back on, there's a reason it came back on. We're never going to turn it back on unless we're starting the descent, and you'll get the PA, hey, we're starting our descent, seatbelt sign's back on. But if you're just level and that seatbelt sign comes back on, there's a reason. We either see something building ahead, we've gotten a report, something has told us, or we've started to encounter it and it's starting to get a little bumpy, and we go, yeah, let's just turn that back on. So that's a small nugget of wisdom. Nobody reaches up and pushes that switch back on unless there's a significant reason.
Yeah, I think that's actually really important because it sounds like very common sense. Oh, the pilot turned it back on. But oftentimes I'll hear people grumbling around me like, oh, the flight attendants just don't want anyone getting up anymore, or the this and the that. And sometimes I'm like, I don't know, maybe that's true. But it's interesting to hear that it's very simple. Like as if you're in a car, you would never like be driving down I-95 and just take your seatbelt off because it seems like there's nothing ahead of you. You don't know when a car might swerve in front of you or something flies off the back of a truck and you have to slam your brakes. Like just keep your seatbelt on. And that's one way to help yourself feel like, okay, this turbulence is normal. It's pockets of rough air. The pilot is keeping us safe. He has his seatbelt on, so will I. Like that's one way that people can help that like fear of flying when that turbulence starts to go. It's a very normal part of flying, and this is why this is happening. So I think that will help as people start to manage their fear of flying. What would you say to someone who is afraid of flying? Besides the turbulence, there's just this fear that happens, that everything from takeoff to landing, it's just like white knuckling, have their, deep breathing going. I definitely have been in cases like that. What are the three things you would say to somebody to help them? Or maybe what are three things you would say to your child, like if to help them kind of, recenter themselves and know that everything's going to be okay?
The first thing I would try to remind them is that this is quite literally the safest industry in the world by a country mile. When you look at the volume of flights per day and the amount of things that happen, I mean, it's absurdly safe. It's, I don't know if you've ever seen Lean Six Sigma, where they try to get to it's like 5 or 6 zeros decimal points of safety. Aviation is like 15 decimal points into the zeros of safety.
Wow.
I'm making that number up, so somebody out there feel free to correct me. But it's absurdly, it's beyond the level of safety exponentially that like an OSHA would require, right? Now, of course, I wouldn't say anything about OSHA to my 6-year-old. He's not going to get it. But I would let him know that it's literally the safest form of transportation that exists in the world, to include walking down the road. Actually, I think the first thing I would say is I would validate his feelings to be scared. Like, it's okay. It's okay to be scared. I understand. It's a big airplane. It moves really fast. It's loud. It's noisy. And that's okay to feel scared. And you don't have to do this. Like, if you don't want to get on this airplane, you do not have to. So that would probably be the first thing I'd say. And then assuming they wanted to continue, I would remind them that how safe it is. And then I would probably offer up, kind of a mitigation opportunity in the event that, hey, you've decided to undertake this journey. We've left the gravity of the earth and we are airborne. Now you're feeling it again. What now? And I'd probably try to, find a buddy system for that person, be it a flight attendant or, if we have another pilot that's actually in uniform, something like that. Hey, if you're really uncomfortable, ring the call bell. We can have that person come back and have a conversation with you. Maybe there's some specific sound or thing that you heard or felt that a description might help you feel a little better. I've seen flight attendants go so far as to sit down in the aisle and hold the hand of that person during turbulence and just sit right there. And it's amazing. Just that human interaction can help a lot. That's probably the best answer I could give on that. It may not be what you're looking for, but that's how I would tackle it.
You actually just reminded me. So during both my pregnancies, I developed really bad claustrophobia, and I was on a plane from Fort Lauderdale to Atlanta, and Atlanta flights, it was just like packed. Everyone's like jumping out of their seats when they land because they have to get to a connection. And I was maybe like 4 or 5 months pregnant. I was by myself, and I just totally like flipped out. I couldn't breathe. And since then, when I'm on very packed airplanes and I'm not in the first, second, or third row, I start to freak out a little bit because I feel like there's, just claustrophobia. It doesn't really make sense, but it's there. So I was on a flight from London to Dublin. And again, it's a British Airways flight. It's packed. It's a London to Dublin. Like, it's as packed as it's going to get. And I just got up. I went to the back of the plane and I said, I'm feeling a little claustrophobic. And the flight attendants, literally, they gave me all the space. They let me just sit and chat with them. They weren't like, okay, you feeling better, now go back. Because like you said, that human interaction helps so much to just be like, okay, I'm having a normal conversation with another human being. Like, I'm fine, I'm safe. And I think that's really powerful. Just be like, it's okay to voice your fear and let somebody who might be able to explain, what's happening in the plane kind of help you through that if they have the time and the capacity to be able to do so. So I think that's super helpful. Thank you. So one of the last few things around the fear of flying is sometimes people get really antsy when things get delayed. You mentioned before when you were like, wait, why is it taking so long? Why are we on the runway? Why aren't we taking off? Can you explain a couple of like the common reasons why we do get delayed? Like, I'd love to hear that as well from like the passenger perspective. Why is this happening? And then for you as like the pilot and the staff, how does that affect you guys with the delays?
Yeah, there's obviously a bajillion reasons you can get delayed when you look at the logistics of moving an operation the size of any major airline. However, there are some common threads. If you're sitting at the gate still and you haven't moved back, there can be, issues with paperwork. Sometimes there's a little bit of delay there. There could be issues with kind of the weight and balance. So the airplane, you think, teeter-totter kind of thing. The airplane has to be very specifically balanced to operate efficiently and safely. And when they're loading up the bags and putting the cargo on, sometimes it takes a little longer. They've got to kind of run all their numbers and get everything in perfectly. And it's just a little bit of a lengthy process. Math is never easy. Much as I liked it, it's still never easy. So that can be one on the gates. One that generates kind of longer delays is weather. And it's obvious when you look outside, there's thunderstorms. Yeah, we don't want to take off into lightning and hail and brimstone and disgusting dark clouds. But when you get weather, so I'll use Fort Lauderdale, for example. There are departures that go out of every major airport, or just about every major airport. So it's a specific route. Just like you said, I-95, it would be like, we're going to take exit this to this highway, exit this to that. We do the same thing in the sky. We fly to this point, we fly this route, and we go up here. And those are called standard instrument departures, or SIDs. So there might be one that goes up, say, the east coast of Florida. And that's what everybody was filed this morning. But now there's a big thunderstorm sitting right where we're supposed to fly through. So if you push back and you were expecting that route, you've been filed that flight plan. Like legally, that's the route that you're supposed to go, and you're not supposed to deviate from that. So if they suddenly close that down, well, now you've got to go back. You've got to get in contact with the dispatcher. They've got to refile it. You've got to re-uplink everything into the airplane. You have to review it. You've got to rebrief it so you all know what you're doing. And it's just it's a process. It's ordinarily takes about, I say, 30 to 45 minutes from the start that you walk into the flight deck till the time the airplane's ready to go. Well, you've now just probably taken 20 minutes that was planned. Now you got to redo all that. So it can take a while. So you might just be sitting, taxiing out, holding for a while. And you're like, where are we going? We're trying to get everything back in the sock so that we can go now up the west side of Florida because that's where all the traffic is. So that's a big one.
I never really thought about that. Like, you just think, okay, there's going to be weather in some area. Like, it's just the amount of, like you said, the procedures and the precision that it takes so that you do hit those 0.00000% of safety. Next time you're delayed because of weather, you can have a greater appreciation of what's going on behind the scenes to still make sure you're getting from point A to point B.
Yeah, we don't do anything without briefing it. So if we're going to fly a departure, we're going to talk about it. And we're going to identify any threats that are along that departure, how we're going to mitigate those, what we're going to do if things go differently than we anticipated. We're going to have that whole discussion. We got to put it all into the automation of the airplane, make sure it all looks good. And that's all after somebody on the other side of things puts together all the paperwork, submits it to air traffic control. They check it. It's a logistical problem in and of itself. Sometimes it's just traffic flow. You say you go in and out of New York airspace, there's a lot of planes. I mean, it's the biggest, most compact airspace worldwide. You've got JFK, LaGuardia, Teterboro, Newark, all in one little bubble. All that traffic's coming in. Sometimes they meter how many planes can take off and go. So you may be sitting on the ground, not moving because they're not ready for you to arrive yet. There's nowhere for you to go if you got there. So they keep you sitting on the tarmac or at the gate. Companies encourage our pilots to give regular updates on those things. And I know as a passenger in the back, if the pilot just speaks up and says, this is why we're delayed, this is our problem. Like I said, bad news heard is better than no news given.
Right.
And hey, I'll give you an update in 10 more minutes. I'll hack the clock and I'll win 10 more minutes. It may just be no update, but I have seen that be helpful.
Well, that was one of the questions. Actually, we have a handful of questions from the listeners, and someone literally, someone posted, "Why do some pilots talk a lot and some hardly say anything? I like it when they give updates." So, so it
Yeah.
sounds like you're one of those pilots that she would love to be on your plane. Is there a reason why some talk more than others?
Personality types. Some people are a little bit more extroverted, some are more introverted, some already have kind of a canned spiel. I spend a lot of time talking. I between debriefs and interview prep, and I'm just a chatty person individually. So I've got no problem standing up in front of the folks and saying, "Hey, welcome aboard," or making a PA. Some folks aren't comfortable with that. They're great pilots. They got, golden hands and feet and can make an airplane sing, but having a conversation with, a bunch of strangers isn't something that they wake up thrilled to do. And so that's probably what influences them to not. And sometimes it's just you're so involved in whatever is delaying you that you forget. If you've got a
Yeah.
maintenance issue that you're trying to figure out, and the gate agent's already moved the jet bridge away and they're ready to push you, but I'm not ready to go, and now I got to call maintenance. I'm just involved in trying to fix the problem, and I'm forgetting, hey, everybody behind that door is patiently sitting wondering what's going on. That's why I use a clock. There's a little clock up front that we can like hack it, and it'll count down in front of us. And so I look down and I see 5 minutes, 10 minutes, like, okay, hang on, let me say something, but no harm, no foul to the folks that are doing something else and not focusing on that.
Totally. I mean, I know for me personally, I love, like I said, more information, the better for my anxiety and my just knowing what's happening. And I can explain it to my kids better. So,
Yeah.
yeah, I appreciate that. So, another question from the audience was we kind of talked a little bit about this, but it's kind of bordering the next step above moderate turbulence, I guess. So, the question is, when should we be scared? I'm legit scared the entire flight.
To be honest, I would really, and I don't mean this bluntly, but if there's a reason to be scared, there'll be no ambiguity. There's no like subtle, I'm not sitting in the back going, "Oh, I know a thing and I'm scared, but you're not." That if you look out the window and the ground is rushing at you, yeah, that's a reason to be scared. If you're upside down, that's a reason to be scared. But 99.9 to the 15th power time, we wouldn't take off if we thought there was a problem. Like we will go the long way around risks. We will avoid at all costs threats that we don't need to avoid. And I've always said this to passengers that maybe do feel a little uncomfortable. I wouldn't put you on this airplane if I wouldn't put my 2-year-old by himself in the back of this plane. Right? If I can't have Bo sitting with his seatbelt off in the back of this airplane, I'm not going. So
I really love that. That'll be something that I think will be my mantra, like over and over again. Because you do say that. I'm like, okay, for me, it's like when I see the flight attendant sit down and put their seatbelt on, like, okay, maybe it's time to just kind of focus and put my seatbelt on. But it's things that you say, like the pilot wouldn't fly the plane if he didn't want to get from point A to point B safely either. And it's things that you say, but it's not until you actually hear from a pilot, like, no, this is real. I would if I'm not getting on this plane and putting you on this plane unless I thought that my family or myself would be safe too. So I think that's super powerful for people listening. You mentioned your children, and I have two girls roughly around the same age too, and we fly a lot with them. So this is kind of going a little off the script of being the pilot, and I'd love to hear from somebody who flies for a living, flies a lot with their family. You guys travel, you do a lot of things. What are some of your like top tips for traveling with young children as a passenger?
we've got traveling down pretty darn good. And I've got to give huge props to Brienne for that. I mean, she is there's so many things I couldn't do, probably everything in my life I couldn't do without her support. But she has a Herculean amount of patience that is like no other. And so she makes it even easier for us to travel because she stays so calm. So I have to do my best to stay calm. I don't want to be the angry dad. Although, hey, traveling with kids is tough. And I say that on every PA. I know what an effort it can be. Whether it's a 50-minute flight or a 10-hour and 50-minute flight, it's tough. And I get it. And I appreciate you choosing to fly on us. But one of the things that has helped, gum chewing is great for in the descent for depressurization issues with ears. Gum chewing, gummies, anything that can cause them to chew will help open up that ear canal that will help depressurize the ears. I forget
Mm-hmm.
what it's I'm drawing a blank on what the actual thing is now, the science thing. Somebody I'm sure will comment on it. So there's that. Having some semblance of little pieces of entertainment. We always bring along a backpack with little trinkets, things that they can kind of, 15 minutes of fun. Here's some little race cars that if we lose and they get stuck inside seats of the airplane, I don't care. Screens obviously are hugely helpful, iPads and phones, and charge them up good before you go. And just, we use a lot of like downloading movies and shows, Netflix, Disney, whatever, where
Yeah.
you can keep them on your phone. That's helpful. Bree has always gotten the big headphones for the kiddos because obviously the in-ear ones are awful for that size ear canal. So that's been a godsend where they don't have to listen to it on volume high because the row in front of us doesn't want to hear Blippy or,
They do
you
not want
know,
to hear Blippi.
or Paw Patrol or whomever it is.
Yeah. No, I love all that. I think that's super helpful. I also do the headphones because no one wants to hear Coco Melon. But I think the first thing that you said was just trying to maintain your own calm. That's something that I always say to parents who ask me, like, okay, I'm going on my first flight with children. I'm freaking out. What do I do? And the first thing I say is before even telling them to be calm, because sometimes, like you said, it's a pressure cooker of stress sometimes when you're traveling alone and then add kids on top of that. But I just say, like, you know what? It's probably going to be a little tough. And that's okay. And then you're going to get there and you're going to forget about that flight and you're just going to move on. And it's okay to just accept, like, it's a tough situation to be in with young kids and you do your best. But the more that you can remain calm, like you said, that Brienne does a really good job at that, the more that you can remain calm, the more that they start to feel a little calmer. It doesn't always work 100% of the time, but it's super helpful to do that. So I appreciate you sharing those little tips there. The last question we got from the audience before we kind of wrap the episode up is any bizarre or paranormal experiences as a pilot?
Unfortunately, I mean, as a commercial pilot, if you say paranormal, no, I've never seen that. The closest I've ever encountered with that is St. Elmo's fire a few times, flying down to Bogota or across the ocean to Scotland. Sometimes if the humidity is high enough, you can get St. Elmo's fire across the windscreen. That's cooler than, it is scary.
Yeah.
Look up all kinds of videos of it, but it's, just little static electricity essentially going up the windscreen. It's fun to look at.
Yeah, cool.
But I've never encountered anything where I've looked outside and gone, I have no idea what that is, and felt uncomfortable in that sense. Obviously, flying in the Air Force, there's been, uncomfortable times, but that's related to not paranormal, strange activity. That's just the nature of that type of flying.
Yeah. And any crazy things that you're just like, what the hell? What's going on in this plane? Like, are you even allowed to share that?
I always say, and I try to help folks recage to this, everybody's entitled to a bad day and a brain fart.
Yeah.
So I have had, many passenger issues where folks come up and they're either, maybe they're overreacting, maybe they're underreacting, maybe they're misreacting. And I think it's just important to give people the benefit of the doubt and treat them with empathy and listen. Boy, I tell you what, we talk about listening as a skill set, hugely undervalued, something I wish I learned in my teens, of authentically listening when someone is speaking, especially when they have a problem. More often than not, that will solve the problem. People want to be heard. They want to be validated. Just know that I'm feeling scared to be on this flight. Is that okay? Yeah, it's okay. I get it. Okay, I'll go sit back down. So that for that reason, I've never really encountered any personality, people related issues that we weren't able to kind of work as a team and solve amenably and then follow up with later. And I had a guy who got, we'll say, the short end of the stick during the big CrowdStrike incident that happened, and he was clearly upset, and it was carrying over to our current flight. He wasn't in the best of moods, and we had a conversation. I apologized to him for the recent flight, and then after the flight, I pulled him aside onto the jet bridge and apologized again because that's not what you pay hundreds of dollars to experience, right?
Yeah.
That's not what this is about. So most of the encounters that you maybe see on social media or in the news are often, there's crazy folks everywhere, so take that into account. But I would say there's probably a high percentage of those that are simply mismanaged human interactions that could have been subverted or at least minimized by showing a little human emotion, little empathy on the front end. That's an assumption. I wasn't there for those instances. I'm sure some of them are completely valid, but I've encountered both sides. So
Wow.
unfortunately, my end has been boring, right? We go from A to B and we get there safely and we have a great time doing it.
I mean, mismanaged human interactions, I think, is like the quote of the whole episode. I think that's amazing. Like that, because you just think like it's so easy to pit one person as the bad guy or the angry guy or the drunk girl or the this or the that. And it's just, if we could just, like you said, come at it with a little bit more empathy, not just from pilot to passenger, but just from person to person. And especially when you put 100+ people on a relatively small space where half the group is anxious out of their mind and the other half might have had a drink at 8 a.m. And now we're
Yeah.
all sitting together waiting for this plane to take off. I think it's a really valid and interesting point to just look at it as, okay, how can we interact with each other, listen a little better, have a little bit more empathy instead of just going right to the bad thing that they might have done or expecting them to do something bad. So I think that's, as a business owner, as a pilot, as a doctor, as a mom, as a dad, I think everyone can take that piece of advice, especially as you travel different cultures, different ways of interacting with each other. I mean, you just got me reeling here. I'm like, my brain's going, that was incredible. So the very, very last thing I want to ask before we finish our episode with our rapid fire questions is, what's your favorite thing about sitting in that seat at the front of the plane and getting to view the whole world in front of you? What is your favorite part about being a pilot?
I think you just said it right there. Is the view. You can't pick a job out there. Anything from a brain surgeon to a professional athlete to you name it. Everyone's job gets old at some point in time, right? People just routine becomes monotony on certain days. Hopefully, you have more good days than bad ones. But when folks ask, "Hey, how do you like being an airline pilot?" My response usually is, "My office has a better view than most."
For sure.
And that's always something that doesn't lose its allure. You catch those beautiful sunsets and you're getting to see it firsthand. You see the stars on a completely no light pollution kind of night, where you can see a lot more under night vision goggles when I used to look under those, but the amount of stars when it's pitch dark is like breathtaking. So that never gets old. The cool views,
Wow.
the clouds. If you're sitting right on the top of a cloud layer, we call it cloud surfing. You're just a foot above it and you're zipping your way through. I mean, that takes you back to being a kid in a candy store, and it's always an enjoyable moment.
Yeah, it's so special. That's incredible. Well, thank you so much for joining us today and kind of debunking some of our fears and anxieties around flying, as well as some really incredible life and relationship advice, how to just work together as a team. I think it really is like full circle talking about how surrounding yourself with really amazing, inspiring people in your deployment and special ops in the Air Force, all the way through how now you handle with clients in difficult situations and delays and all of that. I think it just wraps it all up really well. So thank you. We always end our episodes with 3 rapid fire questions. I don't share them before because I want to see what pops up for you. So we
Okay.
will see what comes up. Okay, number 1, what country or place has made the biggest impact on you?
That's 2 separate questions because one would be country and one would be place. Country, I would say probably Afghanistan.
Oh, wow.
You won't find more beautiful mountains in the mountains of Afghanistan, and I really do put those up against the Andes and the Alps. I mean, they are absolutely beautiful, and to have looked on to something so beautiful during a time frame with so much turmoil, it just resonates very deeply at the kind of the duplicity of that moment.
Mm.
How ironic that can be. But place on the whole, I will say the place that has what was it? You said influence? Is that
Yeah,
the
the
word?
biggest impact. Yeah.
Impact. Probably our cottage, Bree's family's cottage in northern Michigan. I never really knew big family. I come from a very small family, wasn't always super tight knit. And so diving into her very big, very fun, very tight knit family. Every summer we go up to that cottage. We spend as much time in, July as we can possibly get up there, seeing the family bond, seeing what my kids get to grow up with, seeing how great that true family experience is. Man, I've always told Brienne she's never allowed to leave me because I refuse to leave her family.
You're just still sitting there in the cottage.
I'd just still be coming to visit. Yep, she might have found better,
Oh,
but I didn't. So I'm coming to dinner.
I love that so much. Yeah, there's something about being able to go back. I think as travelers, we're always wanting what's next, what's new, the bucket list, tick it off the list. But I think there's something so special to going back to the same place over and over again and getting to like unravel it even deeper every layer, and there's like a comfortability that comes with that, and you get to just relax, and that's amazing. And the thought around Afghanistan, I think, is it's getting a little bit more airtime on in the travel world, people talking about it a little bit more, some really high quality and safe tour groups and stuff like that really talking about that.
Yeah, it's breathtaking.
So number two is, what's your go-to like must-have item when you're traveling? What's your travel accessory, or what do you like to travel with?
I wish the answer wasn't my AirPods. I wish that was not the answer, or my cell phone, because I hate how much I'm attached to it. I have been on kind of this pilgrimage to fill downtime with value. So if I'm on layovers or just sitting in the airplane, it's like, okay, what can I be doing now that makes me better? Whether it's just reading or you name it, whatever it happens to be that day. Maybe it's just getting rid of some administrative stuff that I need to do so I don't have to do it when I get home. But I always travel now. Every time I fly, I always have to have my get me home socks. So for
What's that?
Father's Day, Brie makes these socks that have the kids' faces on them, and we get new ones each year. And so
What
whenever
do you
I'm
mean she
coming
makes
home,
them? Like she knits
well,
them, or she company does it?
a company does it.
Oh,
She
I was like,
orders
I am
them.
so impressed by that. Oh my God.
Yeah, that would be pretty. Yeah, to knit those faces in there. No, she orders them and has them made. But now whenever I'm traveling, like I have to be traveling in those socks. Like those are my lucky socks. They're gonna get me home. They're gonna get me there safe. And it's always one kid on each foot. So
Oh, I
that's
love
like
that.
if I ran out the door right now and they're like, you have to catch a flight, I would grab my phone, my wallet, and those socks.
I love it. That's awesome. Get me home socks. That could be a whole new business.
Could be.
Okay, the very last question is, what's the biggest life lesson that you've learned while traveling?
That is such a deep question. Biggest life lesson I've learned while traveling. Probably this is more of a travel lesson than a life lesson. The best travel experiences that I've personally had, and I think Brienne would back me up on this and would say the same thing, were the opportunities that we took to really experience the outside of the normal area, kind of touristy area, really experience the genuine culture and allow people to kind of show you how they live on the day to day. The places when Costa Rica, Bali, both those places, we really immersed ourselves in just kind of seeing what was. And then other places you go and you check off the bucket list of the tourist attractions. If you go to Paris, you have to see the Eiffel Tower. Of course you do. But how many have gotten to go outside into a more rural area and get to experience kind of that authentic nature? And so I don't think I grew up appreciating other cultures as much as I wish I had. I come from the backwoods of Maine, right? No stoplights, one stop sign kind of town. So there wasn't a big influence of that from northern Maine. As I've gotten to travel more and experience that, like the human is the most interesting part of a place that you visit. You're
Mm,
going to see architecture. I love architecture. You're going to see different landscapes. You're going to try different food. But really, the most interesting things that are out there when traveling are people. And I think I've just become more driven by people in my older age. I'm 38. My back tells me I'm probably 68, but I'm much more driven to be genuinely interested in other people and their experiences than I was probably when I was 28 or 18. So
mm.
that's
I love that. It's almost as if the travel becomes less like you centric and more we centric, like less about, hey, look at me in this cool destination, especially now that social media has like blown up. And then as you get older, at least that's my experience too with traveling, it's like, wait, I actually want to see and experience and immerse myself in how these other people live so that I could take some golden nugget of wisdom because they look so happy or they're interacting so well, or if you're in a blue zone they're living till 100. How can I learn from you instead of it being kind of all about me?
yeah, actually, that triggers another thought. Something we've talked about a lot recently when we travel is to never underestimate the power of simplicity. When you go places, Italy's a great example. You go to Italy and why is the food so good? All they're using are tomatoes and olive oil and a little garlic. And you're like, how is it so good? Because it's simple, right? It's good quality ingredients with a lot of knowledge behind it of how to make them the right way. And it's just some of the best things in life are the simplest. The view from a beach, the sight of a mountain, the authentic interaction of just two people going about their day. Like simple is highly, highly underrated. And I think it takes until you get outside of our first world problems in the US and you see real problems, like real problems, that it recages your brain to like what's important, how good you have it, and then sometimes how much we overdo what was already good.
Mm-hmm.
Like, oftentimes a great steak is just a great steak, or a great gelato is simply one ingredient. Whatever it is, it was already good. You did too much to it. So that's something that I think resonates pretty well from
I love that.
traveling.
I love that so much. Thank you. Thank you. This has been like way more than just flying. I love I love this episode so much. If people wanted to connect with you, are you on social media or email? How would people want to say hi and thank you for sharing your experience?
Yeah, I'm on definitely on LinkedIn under my actual name. Anything else would probably be under my call sign on Facebook, but LinkedIn is probably the number one place. I don't have an Instagram or a Twitter or TikTok or any of those things, unfortunately.
Simple, simple.
Very simple. Yeah.
All right, all right. How did we feel about this episode? I personally learned so much from Simon, and I'm just, yeah, so grateful that he gave his experiences, his, strategies, his tips, his stories. I learned a lot, and I really loved when he talked about his personal life average going up because of his time that he spent in the Air Force. And I think that's something that we can all really take home with us is how are the people that we surround ourselves with contributing to our personal life average and the quality of our life? And definitely something that I know that when I travel, I really do feel like my personal life average goes up because I'm just attracting amazing people and so many diverse people as well. So I hope that's something that you can take with you today. I know at the front of this episode, I talked about sharing one of my top tips for combating anxiety while flying. That's what this episode is all about. And it goes a lot deeper into my ebook, The Mindful Traveler, which you can check out on my website, transformwithtravel.co. But I wanted to share with you as a listener who made it to the very end of this episode. Congratulations. Thank you. All the things. So when you're on a plane and you start to feel turbulence or you see the seatbelt sign go on and you see the air hosts, the flight attendants starting to sit down and, oh, okay, they're starting to get serious about this. Should I be getting worried? And, you just kind of go through that mental chatter in your brain. And truly what that means is it's time to step back into your body. You're inhabiting too much space in your brain going into the what ifs and going into the worst case scenario. And what we really need to do is bring presence back into our body. And it's super simple. There's a lot of techniques and tips in the ebook that there will be something for everyone. Maybe breath work or meditation or mantra isn't for you. There's a load of other tips in the ebook for ways to easily bring presence back into your body. But for me, what helps is counting my breath. So not only am I slowing my breath down and doing a very equal breath, I believe Justin Liebman in episode 43 of the episode, he talks about this breathwork technique. In yoga, we call it samavriti, or you might call it box breath. But for me, it's so helpful because as you inhale, you take a deep breath in for a count of 4. You'll hold at the top of the inhale for a count of 4. Exhale nice and slow for a count of 4. And then hold at the bottom of the exhale for a count of 4. So not only are you intentionally slowing your breath down, which will signal to your body that it's safe to bring the heart rate down, that we're not going into fight or flight, that we're actually able to be calm, but you're also distracting your mind with the count of the breath. So if you're focusing your mind on counting your breath, then and you can actually even do a visualization. As you inhale, you follow up one side of a square, you hold at the top of the inhale, you can follow the top side of the square, exhale, follow the other side of the square down, and then as you hold at the bottom of the exhale, you can follow the bottom edge of the square back to where you started. So it's a really great way to bring in visualization and counting to help you stay out of the what ifs of your brain. You're actually focusing all of the energy of your mind into the count and the visualization of the breath. So you're taking yourself away from those what ifs. You're bringing yourself back into the present moment, distracting your mind because you're counting. And you're also slowing your breath rate down, which will in turn help lower your heart rate. It will help all of those markers of stress start to go down, and you can almost feel that anxiety that builds up from like the chest up to the top of your head. You can almost feel all of that energy just sinking back down into the lower half of the body and being present. So that's just one of my really quick tips that I use. It's free. You don't need to pop in headphones or AirPods for a guided meditation. You don't have to fumble around and search for the best meditation. You just write in your own brain. You can do it. Nobody even has to know that you're doing it. And you can just look like you're cool as a cucumber during the turbulence or whatever is triggering you into anxiety onto your plane. And that's just one of the tips that you'll get through the ebook. So be sure to check it out if it's something that you think will be helpful. And you can use it not just while you're flying. You can use it if you're in a large crowd, if you're waiting in line at a museum, if your flight gets canceled and you're freaking out in the airport. There's so many tips, techniques, strategies, education on how to allow these very normal, very common experiences while we travel, the mishaps, the cancellations, the delays, the mistakes, the turbulence, like I said, literally and figuratively, all of these things are a part of travel. And so the more that we can learn how to cope with that stress, it'll help us not look back at our trip and think that because of that one experience or that anxiety that we felt or that stress, that it ruined the whole trip. We're able to kind of take a bigger picture of it. And that's what we learn and dive deep in the ebook. So I hope you can check it out. Oh yeah, be sure to use code LAUNCH10 at checkout and you'll get 10% off the ebook as well. So my friends, thank you so much for listening. I will see you in the next episode. Have a wonderful, wonderful rest of your day. And this is your reminder to keep on exploring. That's a wrap on today's episode. If you're feeling on fire and lit up to start planning the bucket list adventure you're craving, let's work together. I'm here to manage all of the hassle of planning, hand select your options specifically for you, and give you the inside scoop that no AI itinerary can give you. Click the link in the show notes to look through our pricing and packages. You're one click away from the adventure of a lifetime. This is your reminder to keep on exploring.